etc.
All right. And then I've got one more button to hit before we're going to go live on Facebook. And hopefully we are going live in 5. Okay. Are we live? Let's show the live button. All right. So welcome everybody to exploring the profound synergy of courage, mindfulness, empathy, and compassion, learning to care wholeheartedly for the world. Dr. Joel Levey is our presenter today, and he's the founder of Wisdom at Work, an inspiring early pioneer in globally introducing mindful leadership, deep resilience, collective wisdom, compassion, and contemplative science into mainstream organizations since the 70s. Served as faculty at the University of Minnesota Medical School, worked with thousands of leaders in hundreds of organizations around the globe, including NASA, World Business Academy, U.S. Surgeon General's Office, NHS, NIH, World Bank, World Government Summit, MD Anderson Cancer Center, Fred Hutchinson Cancer Center, MIT, Google, First Earth Battalion, and Institute of Noetic Science, British Parliament, and U.S. Army Special Forces. Published in 14 languages, Living in Balance, a mindful guide for thriving in a complex world, Mindfulness, Meditation, and Mind Fitness, and Wisdom at Work. With his wife, Michelle, he co-founded and stewards Kohola Sanctuary. Did I say that right? A permaculture farm and learning center in Hawaii. And I will put in the chat their website so that anyone who cares to can go there.
All right. Thank you so much, Elisa. Really appreciate all your kindness in putting this whole program together. So let's see. I'm recording on my screen too, also, and I'm not seeing my image here, so I'm just wondering how to go about that. So uh, let's see.
We can see you just fine.
Okay, you can see me just fine. So great. Let me just try one more thing here. All right, so we'll go with your recording probably. So welcome everybody. Really great to see some dear friends and allies from our journey over the years. I think it's appropriate to say, and somebody's typing. I'm not sure who that is, but it's making some noise here. So if we can be a little quieter on that, that would be great. Or just mute out. I'm speaking to you from the Kahe'ahapuaha on the Big Island of Hawaii, and we're in the occupied lands of the Kanaka Maoli people here in Hawaii. And I really want to honor that connection here as we're speaking to you. Really feel privileged to live in this gorgeous area and to be held by the spirit of the people here and many of our teachers here as well. Today, I'd like to invite you on a journey and an exploration around the profound relationship between courage, compassion, mindfulness, and empathy. And I'm going to share my screen with you and some images and slides here. And I really invite you to step through these with me as we go. So as we begin, I invite you just to find your center of gravity, to come home to yourself for a moment. If you like, reach up, touch your heart, gently smile, rest in easy, natural flow of your breathing, and just come home to yourself in this precious moment. And as you do, to experience the quality of presence that you bring into this moment and the courage that shows up to welcome whatever it is that is arising for you in your mind, in your body, in your world. And to appreciate in a sense, to keep the lights of our awareness on, to really show up in the world, especially as it gets crazier and crazier, or more beautiful or overwhelming. There is a quality of courage that's required to maintain that presence. And as we're able to maintain that presence, then we come into a deeper sense of connection and relationship that allows us to resonate empathically with others, which, if we don't manage that correctly, can be totally overwhelming. And that then in that empathic resonance, if we can move towards compassion, that's really what we're looking to realize and to find our way to. So the spirit of this presentation is really embodied and captured in this beautiful quote. I call it a prayer from Einstein. I'd invite us just to read this, kind of like an opening prayer, if you will, as we move into this. A human being is a part of the whole, called by us the universe, a part limited in time and space. We experience ourselves, our thoughts, and our feelings as something separate from the rest, but this is really kind of an optical delusion of consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us that restricts us to our personal desires and to affection for a few people nearest us. And our task in life must be to free ourselves from this prison of the optical delusion of consciousness by widening the circle of our compassion to embrace all living beings and the whole of nature and all of its beauty. Really quite a profound image and thought to begin with. So just so I can get a sense for people here, how many of you have some kind of a daily practice of kind of transformational skills? Okay. And how many of you have encountered moments in your life where it really took courage just to show up and be fully present and not check out? Yeah. And how many of you at some time in your life have been so empathically attuned to the pain and the suffering or the joys or the sorrows of other beings that in moments that was really overwhelming for you and you just didn't know what to do with the intensity of what you were experiencing? Yeah. So to really honor the humanity that we bring into the circle today as we engage in this experiment and this exploration. So this beautiful image here, from Corinthians, we are all part of the body of Christ, and each one of us is a part of that. Echoed by a great Buddhist saint named Shantideva, who said how wonderful it would be when all beings experience each other as limbs in the one body of life. To really appreciate if we're able to show up in our wholeness, we do feel the joys and the sorrows of the world. Compassion, we experience the passion, the suffering of others. It's just part of our birthright, if you will. Oop. Yeah. So to appreciate, we're living in a world at such a critical time. Joanna Macy, who's been a colleague and friend and teacher of ours for decades, in a recent interview with Jem Vendel said, look, beings are lining up in other realms of consciousness, just waiting for the opportunity to be born on planet Earth right now. Because this is such a pivotal time, and our capacity for spiritual growth and development and to open our hearts to compassion is just unparalleled. But to appreciate, we're living in a world that reflects so much of the lack of consciousness, the lack of deep thinking, the lack of deep understanding that has created so many of the problems and the suffering that we experience in our world. And the solution is to be found in individually and collectively accessing a new manner of thinking, a higher level of consciousness, a deeper sense of connectivity and interbeing. Vimala Takaru is another of our teachers, a wonderful woman from India, said, in this era, to be a spiritual inquirer without social consciousness is a luxury that we can ill afford, and to be a social activist without scientific understanding of the inner workings of our mind is the worst of folly. Neither approach in isolation really has any significant success. To appreciate that today what we'd like to do is help you gain a deeper understanding of the nature of your mind so that we can be more effective in the activism that we're involved with in our communities, in our world, in our government in these critical times. There's this acronym VUCA, which many of you have encountered who've spent time with us in the past, describing these modern times. It comes from the Army War College. We encountered it when we were working with the military, describing the modern battlefield and the modern world in which we live as being volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And recently we've started adding a second A to it, that it's absurd at times. Though the absurdity reflects, that this is how unenlightened, unwise beings live, how we treat each other, how we live in our world. We're, like surfers out on the ocean looking at the waves coming in. They keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And honestly, I think this is a time where, maybe some of these inner arts and skills of resilience and meditation and to find mental and physical and social agility and that adaptiveness were maybe more optional back in the 50s, but in these days, we really need to learn how to surf if we want to be a force for good in the world, because I don't think the waves are going to get any smaller. As Martin Luther King reminded us, our scientific power has outstripped our spiritual capacity. We have guided missiles and clearly misguided men. Our hopes for creating living lies in our ability to reestablish the spiritual needs of our lives and our personal character and social justice. Without this spiritual and moral reawakening, we'll destroy ourselves in the misuse of our instruments. And oh, how we're seeing this playing out. But interesting, this word VUCA also in Zulu means to wake up, to see things clearly, to not go to sleep, to not get lost in the dream. And to appreciate, I think we're seeing this play out, especially for those of us that are watching this presentation or this video in the United States. It's such a gut-wrenching time of confronting the lie. And just so inconceivable how many people are not looking at the science or going for alternative realities rather than something that really is congruent with the nature of reality, and just how mind-blowing this is. Otto Scharmer, who's a friend and colleague, we've worked on a number of projects together, has this wonderful model used in the Presencing Institute and the MIT U Lab that we've worked with quite a bit. And it describes the two ways that people may line up with what's going on in the world, that we deny and deceive and turn off our senses and absence ourselves. We freeze our minds, our hearts, and our wills, and that leads us to blame and to harm and to move into violence, which just leaves us with trauma and leaves other beings with trauma. And those cycles of trauma just go on and on and on. Whereas if we have the courage to show up, to suspend some of our beliefs and preconceptions, to see clearly, to allow ourselves to empathize and sense more deeply, to let go of our preconceptions and really find a quality of clear, open, loving presence, then we're able to kind of coalesce the insight that arises in that, to embody that, to enact that, to bring that into our worlds together in a co-creative way that allows us to evolve. I think this model has such applicability for us in these crazy, crazy times. In the UNESCO Charter, it says, since wars begin in the minds of men, it's in the minds of men that we must erect the ramparts of peace. And that's part of what we're up to here. So mindfulness, being present, what is this? As you're looking out through your eyes right now, find that place within you that can smile to yourself and go, oh, I'm seeing. Wow, look at that. I'm awake that I'm awake. But to appreciate this takes courage. It takes great courage to show up, especially when we're in the midst of great intensity, of volatility, uncertainty, complexity. ambiguity. Not to just go looking for a good book with all the answers or some facts that we can believe in, but to stay in the inquiry, to stay curious. Vilma Takar again, to pay attention requires tremendous love of living. A total revolution in how we're examining this isn't for the timid or for the self-righteous. This quality of showing up, of being mindful, of paying attention is for those who love truth more than pretense. This is for those who are sincerely, humbly want to find a way out of the mess that we're in. Each one of us have created out of the indifference, the carelessness, and the lack of moral courage, the courage that it takes to show up. And to appreciate and to normalize when we're close to truth, we'll have tears in our eyes. And they may be tears of wonder and joy. They may be tears of great sorrow and compassion. One of my favorite stories about compassion, I'll drop that in here. There was a Lama who was an old friend of the Dalai Lama who came to visit him after he had escaped from 18 years in a Chinese concentration camp. He made his way to Dharamsala and he's talking with the Dalai Lama. And Dalai Lama says, wow, were you ever afraid? Because he was tortured terribly. And the Lama said, yeah, I was afraid. And the Dalai Lama went to comfort him a bit. Like, of course you were afraid. And the Lama says, no, I was most afraid in all those years of being tortured. I was most afraid that I would lose my compassion for the Chinese, that I would lose my compassion for the people who were torturing me. Quite profound. So with Joanna Macy's work, which I think is some of the most relevant technology and teachings of these times, Joanna says, look, before we go straight into the news, straight into the overwhelming misfortune of what's going on in our lives and our world, begin with gratitude. Always begin with gratitude. Now let's just take a moment to do that. Just touching your heart, gently smiling, being mindful of who or what arises that you're grateful for. And if someone or something arises that you're grateful for, then to take that to heart and to radiate your loving kindness, your compassion, your blessings to whoever or whatever you're grateful for. And to just do this for a few breaths, a few moments, gratitude and blessing. Opening our hearts, opening our minds to connect more deeply with the abundance of resources and goodness that's available to us. So that in a sense, as we fill ourselves with gratitude, then we're able to walk into the valley of the shadow of death and fear less evil, perhaps, because we're more resourced than if we went straight into reading the news or straight into the fray of things. To appreciate how valuable it can be to begin with gratitude, then open our eyes to the suffering of the world in order to see with a deeper wisdom, a deeper understanding and compassion, and then to go forth with that compassion into action. So profound. And again from Joanna, who said, our sorrow is the other face of love, for we only mourn what we deeply care for. The sorrow, grief, and rage you feel is a measure of your humanity and your evolutionary maturity. As our hearts break open, there will be room for the world to heal. And Father Thomas Merton, who said, the whole idea of compassion is based on a keen awareness of the interdependence of all living beings, which are all a part of one another and all involved in each other. As our science goes deeper, we're starting to understand that individuals exist in relationship. We interbe with each other being. I mean, just as you breathe right now, just sense as you breathe that you're breathing with all beings who share the breathosphere. And that means all beings who've ever breathed or who will ever breathe in the future, that every breath just stitches us more deeply into a profound and intimate communion with all living beings who have lived in the past. So to appreciate, no matter how crazy things are, there is no time now not to live. So going more deeply into understanding what we're talking about here, to appreciate, few people have had the privilege of studying psychology, of studying contemplative science, of engaging in practices, of growing up in families or going to schools where we learn how to use our primary operating system. And the suffering we experience emotionally, mentally, in terms of our physical wellness, in terms of our environmental wellness and social wellness, reflects, I think, the fact that we just haven't been operating our minds very well. And William James, who was the founder of the modern field of psychology, said the greatest thing in all education is to make our nervous system our ally instead of our enemy. So profound. So let's take a look at how this works. There's a wonderful model. Dan Siegel, another friend and colleague, so respect his work, in 1999 came up with this notion of the window of tolerance. And the window of tolerance is when we're in our place of well-being, where we have our wits about us. We can see clearly. We're not overcome by distress and overwhelmed by circumstances. We can feel joy, pay attention, be patient and non-reactive, act with kindness and gentleness, be considerate and thoughtful, access our reasoning. But when the stresses go up, is oftentimes will bump us up into hyperarousal at first. We get frustrated, our frustration escalates into anger, into rage, into harming, into panic or fear. We go into fight or flight, we mobilize. And on the flip side of that, the stresses may increase so much that we just flip into freeze, we shut down. We implode, we go curl up in the corner and whimper. It's another way to look at it. At the bottom here would be the window of tolerance. And then as the stresses go up, we go into fight or flight. And as the stresses go up even more, we start to numb out, go into dissociation and shut down and just feel trapped. So to appreciate, psychophysiologically, we're wired for this. We're wired to be able to go out of our window of tolerance, but then ideally to come back as quickly as we can to renew and replenish ourselves again. But to appreciate, so many people don't have the skills to self-soothe, to comfort themselves, to return back to, in a sense, come home to themselves and self-regulate. And so we have a lot of people at play in the world. If you've been watching the hearings about what's going on from the January 6th committee, you could see how a lot of people were not working out of their window of tolerance. They were really in these places of great threat. One of the signs that we're not in touch with ourselves is a condition called Alexithymia, which is essentially translates as no words for feelings. We're not able to name what we're feeling, that I'm frustrated, I'm feeling impatient, I'm sad, I'm joyful, I'm happy, I'm confused. And this is a technique, actually, a really powerful mindfulness technique. You might try this like any time that you read an email. Name the feeling you're left with after the email or the message that comes in, or you get off a phone call, or you leave a meeting with somebody. Just how are you feeling about that interaction? And name it. And just by developing the connectivity in your mind between the parts of the brain that pay attention and the parts of your mind and brain that can name and put into words, this actually builds greater resiliency and capacity in the brain. Mindfulness, just really down and dirty, simply put here, kind of in a conventional, kind of mainstream sense. This comes from University of Wisconsin, where they had posted this. when they were teaching a mindfulness class, is just to frequently pause, get present, and then to proceed. So in the sense, we can pause after interaction, and as we get present, we could just name the feeling that's rising for us. Or maybe even see if we could name the feeling that we sense was alive for the other people we were interacting with. And then proceed, carry on, move on with kindness and compassion. So I think at a personal level, at a clinical level, at a societal level, this notion, if we don't listen to and respond wisely to the whispers, they will escalate into screams. And I'd invite you just to consider in your own life, where have you seen this playing out? In your own world, where have you seen this playing out? Clearly, the climate crisis is one of these situations. We've known about this since the 50s or the 70s. And we didn't listen to the whispers. And right now there's screams, and it seems in so many ways we're not listening to the screams at the level that we need to. Interestingly, the word mindfulness in the original Pali, sati, the Pali language that the Buddha spoke, was translated the word Pali was translated as mindfulness by Rhys Davids back, I think, in the late 1800s. And Rhys remembered the word mindful from an old Anglican prayer that said, always be mindful of the needs of others. And the association with that prayer led to the actual coining of the word mindfulness. In this day and age, I remember being in a conversation with John Kabat-Zinn and Danny Goleman at one point, some of the folks in that zone, and we were talking, did we misbrand mindfulness? Should it maybe have been called kindfulness instead of mindfulness? Beautiful little book called Kindfulness, if you look for it. So this notion that the more you listen, the more you will hear, the more we will hear, the more we hear, the more and more and more deeply we will understand how important mindfulness is to help us comprehend what's going on. So let's bridge mindfulness now with courage and mindfulness, moving towards empathy and compassion. Dan Siegel has this wonderful little acronym of PART, P-A-R-T, presence. When we're with somebody, to be present. And as we're present, as we're mindful, as we're aware, then to allow ourselves to attune to this other person, to really come into resonance with them, to have some empathy with them. And through that resonance to feel safe, to have a field of trust and mutual well-being, where we can really interbe together and interact together in that way. With the mindfulness, another acronym that we've adapted here, CORAL, when you're practicing mindfulness, to be curious what's going on inside and outside, to be open to whatever's arising and accepting to that as we'll get there, to come into resonance with what we're experiencing and to accept that this is what's happening right now, kind of like the weather. It's rainy, it's sunny. I might prefer it otherwise, but that's what's happening. And to embrace everything that's arising with this quality of loving awareness. Curious, open, resonant, accepting, and loving. So this wonderful notion that Thomas Hübl, another really beloved friend and such a great teacher in our times, has really brought this notion forward. He and Dan Siegel, I think, this notion of feeling you, feeling me. The sense that our body feels when another person is feeling us. Imagine that like with a young child, being held in its mother's arms, looking into her eyes, being held, being comforted. I feel you feeling me. When I feel you, your nervous system perceives I feel you, and that creates a deeper sense of security, of safety. We can relax. Our nervous system can downregulate. We can be at peace and well-being. But when I don't feel you, your nervous system picks up on that too. When I'm checked out, when I'm distracted, you would pick that up. And even though you may not be aware of it, and not being felt creates stress. There's a sense of something's off here. There's some tension in the field. Such a profound notion. Feeling you, feeling me. So empathy, empathic resonance, there's a somatic component to that. Think of some time when you were in the presence of someone, you were really empathically in resonance with them, how you felt that in your body. Maybe a quiver or a softness or a hardness, or somehow or another you were physically resonant with that. Emotionally, you felt their sadness, you felt their fear. And cognitively, you could kind of have a metacognition of, oh, they're sad because of this, or they're feeling anxious because of this scenario that might unfold, a medical test or whatever it may be. So that there's this embodied aspect, this emotional aspect, which is also embodied, and this cognitive aspect, which is kind of about understanding and perspective sharing, theory of mind. One way to move toward empathy, and if you can see other people on the screen, you could try it with them, or you could just use me as a target, is just to consider, as you look at me, as you look at Elise or someone else on the screen, to appreciate that. Just like me, this person wants to be happy. They want to be healthy. They want to be safe. They want to feel at ease. They want to find meaning and value in their life. They want to be free from anxiety and suffering. I'd invite you to go out for a walk sometime today. Just walk down the street, just kind of regarding the people that you meet, even the crows and the birds and the cats and dogs, as this being just like me wants to be happy, healthy, fed, cared for, nurtured. That's such a quick path towards moving toward empathy. And to appreciate when we're in the presence of another person, when we're feeling each other, when we're feeling each other's pain, the parts of our brain that light up when we're feeling our own pain are located right next to the parts of the brain that light up when we feel each other's pain, when we're in an empathic resonance. So those parts of the brain are really coupled. And that can become overwhelming at times because we can't really separate ourselves from the suffering that we're feeling of others. But we'll explore that more deeply. So putting all these pieces together here, the courage to show up and be fully present with others. That's about courage and mindfulness. That allows us then to come into empathic resonance with each other. Somatically, we sense in our body what other people are feeling. We emotionally resonate with and could even name the emotions that the other person is feeling and that we feel in resonance with them. And this cognitive resonance, we get where they're coming from. We understand their hopes, their fears, their needs at a cognitive level. And what that then can move us towards is responding. Compassion is a responsive engagement where we actually reach out mentally, physically, energetically, even with a prayer, to reduce or resolve that suffering. I love this painting from Alex Gray. What a gifted brother, and again, a dear friend. So empathy is about us coming into resonance with the emotions of others. And it's so important for building healthy, thriving relationships. But if that empathy overwhelms us, it can turn into empathic distress or empathic overload. And this is especially true of caregivers. Any of you that are caring for elderly parents or people that are disabled or helping people through COVID or whatever it may be, it can just be overwhelming and throw us into helplessness and depression and burnout and really take a toll on us psychophysically. And the remedy for that empathic distress and empathic overload, which has been mislabeled as compassion fatigue, it's actually empathy fatigue or empathic overload. The remedy for that is when we move to compassion. And compassion activates a whole different set of circuitry in our brains as we move in from a place of heartfelt concern to actually engaging with and responding to the suffering that we're in resonance with in a way and with a motivation to relieve that suffering. So to appreciate that this compassion can really be a profound resilience factor, especially if we're on the edge of or moving towards overwhelm and burnout. If we can move out of empathy into compassion, actually reach out and touch somebody's heart, or hold them in our heart. If they're hungry, give them food. If they're lonely, give them a smile. Reach out with compassion in whatever kind of way. That allows the energy to move through us, the energy and information of that encounter to move through us rather than just build up and overwhelm. So if you look at the research, there's 5 dimensions of compassion. Most of the lists don't include the somatic component, but I added that here. We feel the suffering of others in our own body through empathic resonance. There's the empathic component, a sympathetic concern related to feeling moved emotionally. We resonate with the emotions of the person. And then the cognitive element of we're aware of the suffering and we understand where it's coming from. But in compassion, then, we move towards generating the wish or the intention to ease the suffering of others or ease the suffering of ourselves. And the motivational component, which is this responsiveness or readiness to, I will help this person in this kind of way. I will send a donation. I will make a call. I will take a few moments and add a few cute emojis and just let them know I care. However we might express that compassion. Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who we've been blessed to be with him and the Dalai Lama. I think this is a picture from when we were in Seattle together hosting the Seeds of Compassion event. The John Raymer, who's involved with World Unity, was a key player in along with us. Arch says, compassion isn't just feeling with someone, but seeking to change their situation. Frequently, people think that compassion and love are merely sentimental. No, they're demanding. If you're going to be compassionate, be prepared for action. And even if that's just action of your heart reaching out with metta and karuna, with loving kindness and compassion or prayer, that's action. So to appreciate, compassion can begin with ourselves. And there's tremendous movement in recent years. Bless Kristen Neff for her brilliant work on articulating this body of work around self-compassion. And this wonderful formula to have compassion for ourselves, to first be able to say to ourselves when we're experiencing a moment that this is a moment of suffering, that we own it. We take it to heart. The second step is to acknowledge suffering's a part of life. Third is, may I be kind to myself. And fourth, may I give myself the compassion I need. So we really normalize this. We engage with this. We fill ourselves with kindness. We take care of ourselves so that then we can begin to move out from that self-compassion to actually care more genuinely and deeply for others. The beauty of self-compassion is that instead of just replacing negative feelings with positive ones, that we're actually generating these positive feelings of care and connectedness within ourselves. Self-compassion is strongly linked with positive emotions like happiness and satisfaction for life, curiosity, gratitude, excitement. So profound. And the research indicates that increasing our self-compassion as well as compassion for others really enhances the quality of our life and decreases our vulnerability to depression and anxiety, self-criticism, and the impacts of trauma. So it's good medicine, if you will. We touched on that earlier. So this beautiful iconographic image out of Chinese and out of Tibetan culture of Kuan Yin or Avalokitesvara, like the Bodhisattva, the angel of universal compassion. And this archetype is said to have 1,000 arms, 1,000 hands that reach out. And in each of the hands is an eye. If you look carefully here, you can see the eye in the hands. And it's the sense of from the heart of universal compassion, we reach out to all beings, guided by wisdom to ease their pain. And if they're hungry, we offer food. If they're lonely, we give a smile or a hug. If they need resources, we offer resources, to just find this heart within ourselves of boundless compassion, dedicated to the salvation, if you will, of all beings, like the broken heart of Jesus. Beautiful image. So would like to just do a little compassion meditation with you here really briefly. A meditation called Tong Lin, which is one of the most profound and I think, important meditation practices of these times. In all of our books, you can find copies of that. If you want to reach out to me after this session, and I'm happy to send you some narratives on this. But essentially, just if you like, just reach up and touch your heart, gently smile, and just see if you can connect with your heart and the heart of your heart, your true heart, your deep heart, your sacred heart, however you conceive of that. Some dimension of you that is of just absolute goodness and purity and openness. Some quantum, deep, essential, mysterious dimension of your true heart. And sense that locus of transformation within the depths of your heart is just floating in the open space of your awareness, as though your whole body just becomes filled with space now. So there's no place within you for any density or stuckness to be. And now as you have the courage to open your field of awareness, if you notice any suffering or pain or fear, anxiety, or agitation within you, imagine that you can breathe that agitation, fear, or pain in to your heart of hearts and have it dissolve into that dimension completely and be completely dissolved and resolved. And open your heart to an upwelling and an overflowing of waves of compassionate light that flow back to wherever that suffering came from within you, to your joints, to your aching heart, to your belly or your back, or wherever the pain may be. So as you breathe in, you gather the suffering and the pain, let it dissolve completely, and you radiate and extend waves of compassion, waves of light as you exhale. And then if others come to mind who are suffering, they're individuals or groups of beings who share the larger body of life with you. As you breathe, imagine that you can actually breathe in and gather their sorrow, their suffering, their vulnerability or pain into your heart of hearts, into the little Kuan Yin or sacred space within your heart, where their sorrows and pains are dissolved, and opens your heart to an upwelling and an overflowing of responsive compassion, flowing back to them, comforting them, bathing them in waves of light, comfort, ease. And you just rest in the easy, natural flow of the breath, gathering inflammation, letting it dissolve into the heart, and breathing out coolness. Or like in the St. Francis prayer, injury, breathing in injury and breathing out pardon, sorrow and breathing out joy. It's a beautiful, beautiful practice just to carry with you, especially as you're watching the news or reading the news, especially if you're in situations where there's a lot of tension or pain. Or times when you're just, feeling concern over people in Yemen or in Afghanistan or Ukraine or in your family, instead of just feeling the resonance of that, to actually be able to engage through this practice. It's so profound. So for a moment, if you like, just reaching up, touching your heart, gently smiling. Just behold how this touched you, what has come alive within you, how it feels to be in this contemplation. So part of the power of this practice of Tonglen is it allows the distress that we feel within us and around us to be a trigger to catalyze our engagement with our inner transformational work. Creates a context in which we begin to actually value the fuel of encountering suffering. And it establishes within our body, within the depths of our many-dimensional being, a locus for this transformation. This builds our confidence in our ability to open our hearts and minds to embrace the suffering of others without being overwhelmed. And it can really strengthen our sense of meaningful compassion and engagement with other living beings. Thank you to Willa Miller, good friend, who this is a beautiful presentation that she developed. Some science around this. These are composite images of data collected from a control group and a group of meditators. And you might notice that there's a difference here. The nose is at the top there and the ears on the side, looking like down on the brain at the neural activity here. The controls were a group of people trained in a meditation on limitless compassion for a week, and they practiced, and then they came to the lab and they were measured, and that's what their brains looked like. The meditators were a group of really long-term meditators, people who logged 10 or 20 or 30,000 hours of meditation, really virtuoso meditators. And you can see that for people who've been involved in contemplative practice for a long period of time, the power of compassion to light up the brain. What you're seeing here is a brain that's hyper connected with itself, where all these different regions of the brain are really lit up and communicating with each other. Tremendous neural integration. That practice makes perfect, that we start where we are and we just keep dedicating ourselves to increasing our capacity. And that over time, that really makes a difference in the quality of our lives and the way our brains work. And what we're finding is that with even 8 or 10 or 20 hours of practice, we're actually making measurable changes in the structure and the function of our brains. So moving towards completion here, to remember our task in life is really to free ourselves from the prison of our optical delusions of consciousness by widening the circle of our compassion to embrace all living beings and the whole of nature in all of its beauty. Thank you, Einstein. To really appreciate our capacity to light ourselves up through these transformational practices, to really allow ourselves to approach these with great dedication and devotion, to tap into the streams of blessings and the lineages that these wisdom teachings have come down to us through, that we may live as a bright, shining force for good in our world. To appreciate that as our wisdom grows, we realize that being kind to each other, being ethical, is just how we behave when we realize that we belong together, that we're part of the same body of life. And moving towards closing here, this brilliant insight from Václav Havel, where he says, without a global revolution in the sphere of human consciousness, nothing will change for the better in the sphere of our being as humans. And the catastrophes towards which this world is headed, be they ecological, social, democratic, or a general breakdown of civilization, will be unavoidable. The salvation of this human world lies nowhere else but in our human hearts, in our human power to reflect, in our human meekness, and in our human responsibility. There is no time now not to love. I'd like to end with auspiciousness, this beautiful prayer from Shantideva that Dalai Lama says, he says this 100 times a day. maybe that we all take this to heart. And it says, for as long as space endures and for as long as living beings remain, until then too may I abide as a shining source of limitless compassion to dispel the misery and the suffering of the world. So just pause for a moment to see how all this has landed for you. We'll open things up in a moment here for some reflections. And if you like, in the reflections, you could just bring forth what challenged you in what we shared today, what was inspiring or surprised you or deeply touched or moved you, or what are you grateful for from this presentation. A few of our resources here, I'll try and drop these in the chat. A couple of books, both of which have the Tonglen meditation. And do feel free to take a screenshot of this, send an email if there's any follow-up thoughts or requests. Yes. Thank you. Okay. Your voices are welcome. So any reflections to share on what was meaningful or any questions?
Well, I came in late. I was waiting to see if someone else wanted to share first about the presentation. I'm sadly missed that. Not sadly, I was in another one that was excellent also. I can't be everywhere at the same time. I can't.
Go ahead, Nancy.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't learned to multitask. Yeah, I cannot emphasize enough the power of words. Like even when Einstein's talked about there is, if you're in a prison, that doesn't even resonate with me. It doesn't, it's not even in my radar, in my computer. Wasn't raised that way. So like I put in there's only a planet of peace. Sometimes we're peaceful, sometimes we're not. Then we just have to focus on more peace, less peace to more peace, not less prison to more prison, less war to more war. And same with the other gal that made that quote. The only time is now to love. Why add all those double negatives? The only time is not now to not love or whatever. I go crazy with people's application of words. So thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Anyone else reflections to share? Good to see some friends here with us. Chris, always good to be in the circle with you. Yeah, I'd welcome you in the few minutes we have, maybe just a little bit from everybody. Just what was meaningful for you and what we shared today. If you like, not required. I value your voices. Tony.
Joel, I'll speak up just for a second or two, but tell you what I have learned over the years being introduced to you, and what you re-emphasized today is that we really do have to get to a point where we realize how interconnected we are to one another, even though we may disagree, maybe we don't understand, maybe we don't appreciate what's going on in our relationships with one another. We've got to realize we're still interdependent and dependent upon one another.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I do know this, is I've been raised to, especially in my religious life, and down here in the South in Alabama, to kind of be proud of my religion to a point where I feel maybe above or beyond or can be exclusive to others. And I'm realized that is just not the truth that needs to be known and needs to be really stated as gospel, that God is in all of us, or however you want to call God. The Christ is in us, and we need to really appreciate that and have compassion on ourselves, and then we can have compassion on one another, I believe. Just thank you, Joel. I just appreciate this time together and the times we've been together in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. My eyes are moistened by your words, and yeah, just appreciating. It's probably been 10, 15 years that since we first connected or so. So yeah, good to have you on the call with us. Any other voices, just reflections on what was meaningful for you in the few minutes we have? Karen.
I'll share. I just always appreciate the reminder for the compassion for myself and acknowledging the courage it takes to show up, and no matter how it is I'm showing up. And I liked the piece about naming what I'm feeling before moving on to the next thing as a way to increase my resilience. I'm going
That's great.
to commit to doing that.
Beautiful. Thanks, Karen. Great to see you.
Good to see you. See you soon at home.
Yeah. Hope safe travels.
Another way we can show our individuality is very simple. Simply change your name to how you feel in this moment now. I've been Nancy World Peace, Nancy Earth, Nancy Fire, Nancy Climate. It's wonderful feeling to just start fresh with every speaker, every talk. So I encourage you to, except for the speaker, because I want to remember their names, but for the participants, yeah, be creative. This is what the new world is all about. The more, even Einstein said, imagination is more powerful than knowledge. That was written on my high school mural in tiles, huge mural. That stuck with me. That one sentence from 1960s. Yeah, so please,
Thank you, Nancy.
Joel
Yeah.
Bliss, Lila Happiness.
Okay, thank you. Got a couple more minutes here. Any other brief reflections?
Oh, I have to add one more thing, please, because I've seen a pattern throughout the whole weekend with everybody. Everybody is just rushing into the very next thing instead of being in the now. Like when I finish the period at the end of the sentence, I'm more than willing to say over, I'm complete, thank you. And then, I feel like every single time I've spoken with every single speaker, they've rushed me off with the last word, this last syllable. It's not pleasant. It's not respectful. It's not reverent. It's like, shut the fuck up kind of attitude. I have to move on. It's my show and I have to get more people to do whatever. It's not respectful. We have to take a breath at the end of the period and then say, thank you to one another. Good old kindergarten 101. Thank you.
I love that. Chris, Lila, Joseph, which one of you is getting up first? We got about 2 minutes left.
Thanks.
Again, have everything be popcorn volunteer style. Don't make it awkward on people calling on them. Let them choose, for themselves. They've got the big girl and boy panties on, as Marianne Williams says.
I am listening to this on my telephone, and so I'm having a bit of problem navigating and seeing everybody. One of the things that I'm so moved by, Joel, is the ability you have to bring in the most incredible pictures to express what you're saying. I'm so moved by all your images are just so evocative that it's something that I feel really grateful to bathe in as I hear your words.
Thanks, Lila. Good to have you with us. Joseph, anything you'd like to share?
Yes, I'm so grateful that your presentation, and it's very beautiful, the artistic beauty, and also very helpful, and help me reminding me the beautiful picture, artistic, and complex subject bringing to simplicity.
Thank you, Joseph. Always good to be in the circle with you here. So
Thank
as
you so much.
yeah, so let's just take a moment in the spirit of dedication, just any goodness, any inspiration that has arisen for you that's alive within you now. Just envision bringing that into your heart, into your sacred heart, the deepest dimension of your being, and letting it flow from there into the hearts of all beings as a blessing, as a affirmation of connectedness, that this great goodness might be shared by you into the hearts and minds of all beings, and that all beings will receive this dedication however they most need at this time. If they need peace, let it give them peace. Or joy, let it be joy. Or nourishment, let this be received as nourishment. Really affirming our deep, deep interconnectedness and inner beings with all life. So thank you all, and thank you to anyone who comes back to see the recording of this at a later time for being called to participate. Yeah, deep bows. And Elisa, bless you for all your kindness and patience in putting this together. You really showed up so wholeheartedly. I'm really grateful for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Aloha.
Thank you so much. Plenary should be about open now if y'all aren't going anywhere, don't have anything else to do. There's amazing presentations all over World Unity Week. So please join everybody in the plenary if you have time.
And Elisa, if you can send me the link for your recording, because mine got a little garbled with screen freezes and all, so I'll just grab it from wherever you post it.
Okay, I will do that.